Hello, and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. So, my guest today she actually has two lives. I could read two bios for her, but let's just stick with the highlights because I want you to actually hear her story yourself. Ana Gomez was born in the Philippines and she was educated abroad, but she met and married her best friend who whisked her away to beautiful Chicago about 20 years ago, where she started off in the mailroom at Leo Burnett, one of the largest advertising agencies in the world. Now, she didn't just stay there. She actually worked her way up through the ladder and became the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of the Leo Burnett Group. Now, in this capacity, she has a full-time job, huge, big job, but she also serves on the board of two nonprofit organizations, the Girl Scouts of America and the Hugh O'Brien Leadership Organization. Now, that's how I got to know her because she was on the board for that organization that was run by a very good friend of mine. But what I didn't know about her is that she also is Christine Bray. And as Christine Bray, she's published 6 novels. She has an established fan base. She ranks in the top 100 months and months and months after her books come out. And her last 3 novels, In This Life, 8 Goodbyes, and The Year I Left, have all won literary awards, in addition to being immediate bestsellers. So, Ana, Christine, welcome to Big Talk.
Hi, thanks for having me, Laura.
So let's start off by talking about the story of the work life. You were born in the Philippines. Who did you think you were going to be when you grew up? What were your goals? What were your plans? Because certainly I know it wasn't what you got going on right now.
No, it wasn't actually. I married pretty young, 24, and I married in the Philippines, had my first 2 kids. And on a whim, as a 24-year-old, one day just in the middle of running a business, I came from a family that was really into business. So they encouraged me, to go on my own and start something. And so I did. I actually had a restaurant. It was the first bagel restaurant in the Philippines. And it was a 24-year-old thing, and I was restless. And really, I didn't know much about moving to the States. And on a whim, I said to my husband, why don't we move to the States? And he was like, why? And, I said, I don't know. I think, our kids would be better off there. Let's just try it. And so we moved here when I was 24 and he was 27. And it was just a rude awakening. I moved here in the 90s when there weren't very many people like me, let alone people like me who didn't go to school here, who were trying to find a job. And that started kind of my journey. The thing that obviously complicated it is I had 2 young toddlers. And I had to figure out my path and what I wanted to really do. And coming here was just kind of like, you're 24, you think you're such a hot shot, you've had a business back home, and you think anyone will hire you, have a degree in economics and in accounting. What could go wrong? And then everything went wrong. It took a long time for me to find a job. And the first job that I found was as a copy girl. When I asked, what's the definition of a copy girl, they said it's really easy. You're just going to stand by the copier and copy checks all day. I'm like, oh, okay.
Sounds exhilarating.
Yes. And so that was my first lesson in humility. I needed to get a job and I needed to start somewhere. And it's probably the best thing I ever did, because in that job, I met, people that would be friends up to this day. I learned the value of work. I learned how to be a working mom. And I learned, the value of resilience.
So I love that, one of the things I love about that story is that your professional bio writes that, you married your best friend and he whisked you off to Chicago. Like, clearly you're a romance writer, because that's not
Yeah.
the story, right?
No.
The story is you just on a whim decided to go. Why Chicago? I mean,
He
Chicago's pretty cold.
No, his parents are he grew up in Munster, Indiana.
Ah, okay.
So we had that connection, and he went to Purdue, and he was really into the Midwest. And That's really all I knew. So I'm like, okay, let's go to Chicago, and obviously Chicago's where the jobs are.
Yes, yes. So you're a copy girl. You're balancing having a young family and
Yes.
what were your professional hopes? Did you think, you wanted to get your foot in the door in this place, or were you like, maybe I'll open a restaurant here? Like what was the plan? What was the plan?
Well, I have a degree in accounting, and so I always wanted to be in the business or accounting field. And I didn't go to school here, and I would take the train every day, and I made friends on the train. And this small group of people would advise me, you've got to take the CPA exam. You have to be certified in the US, or, no one's going to pay attention to your Philippine degree. Even if it was a great school and it's recognized internationally, it was a time where I guess, 90s recession-ish kind of, it was hard to get a job, first of all, and then let alone as a foreigner, it's harder to get a job.
Mm,
So it was, so they advised me, and then I made up a plan, and I said, okay, I'm going to take the CPA exam. And then I'm going to work in different industries until I find the industry that I like. And I learned pretty quickly that you can't really r- rise in the salary norm, in the salary field, unless you jump from job to job, because you go change your positions, you change
mhm.
your positions. A normal promotion would be like a 3% raise or something, as we know in the corporate world. So we would I had a plan. The only thing is that I had two toddlers. It was very difficult for me to work and study. So I didn't pass the first try.
Mm,
I didn't pass on the second try. I kept going, and I finally passed on the third try. And that opened up a lot of doors for me. To have the words CPA after your name just helped to bring some validity to the credentials that I earned in the past, even before
mm,
I moved here. So, and I had the 3-year plan. So, 3 years, every 3 years, I would look for something else, because I would go from industry to industry. And then I was advised, to be an accountant with the right credentials, you have to start in public accounting. So I started out as an auditor. A very nice Filipino man who had a minority practice in Chicago took me in and mentored me. And I was actually sad to leave after 3 years, but I told him I have a plan. I got to go. And I worked in different industries. I worked in telecommunications and manufacturing and logistics, um, until I found my home at Leo Burnett.
mm, mm. So I gotta ask you about the people on the train, because I'm fascinated about that.
Yeah.
You're getting advice from random strangers on trains. Did you? I know people who take commuter trains. You kind of see the same people at the
Yes.
705 every single day. But like, did you just sidle up next to some people that were reading the Wall Street Journal, or like, how did you
No, no,
start
no.
asking this
No,
advice?
you know what? I'm a creature of habit. I sat in the same place every day,
Yeah.
which is like a double bench, the ones that
Hmm.
face each other.
Yes.
And at first, I'm really shy. I'm just sitting there, not talking to anyone. And then little by little, it's the same people. So then they would say, "Where are you from?" And then we would start talking. And then I actually came to a point where, I had no friends here. Um, and the 90s was the time where we would still write letters
Hmm.
to your friends back home and mail them. Like, there was Yahoo or some, like, the first internet providers, but it was very hard to make friends here. And then the people on the train just became my friends. And we would take the same train. We would take the 6:45 and take the 5:45 every day.
And they must have been like hanging on, waiting for your results for the CPA exam. You got on the
Yeah.
train. You had to tell them you failed though
When I
twice.
failed, when I saw them the first time when I got my results, I cried.
Oh my goodness.
And then the second time, I cried again. I cry a lot. So that, I think that's the romantic in me. I cry at everything. So
So you find her. I love that. I love that, and I'm imagining the celebration, right? They're all getting on the train knowing you're about to get your third results, and they're probably afraid to ask.
And if I could have invited them to there's an awarding ceremony, I could only invite four people, I think. So it was my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and the two kids, and my husband was the fifth. So I actually had five people. If I could have invited them, I would have.
Are you
I
st
only
are you still in touch with them? I'm actually curious about that.
I am. I lost touch for a while because I've moved and I've taken a different train. But yes, we are in touch. We text. A lot of them have moved on. A lot of the women were a lot older. They've had deaths in their family. They've had sickness. I've been watching, and as I've grown, I've kept them updated. Um, it's just the way I am.
That's incredible. I think so many of our destinies are created by the people that we decide to surround ourselves with, and so much of that comes down to chance, right? Like
Yes,
like, yeah, I met my husband in a bar, right? Like you meet people in these moments, and I think a lot about those sliding door moments. Like you happen to get on that train car instead of a different train car, right?
yeah,
That day maybe somebody was eating something that was interesting and you asked a question about it. Or I just think about those moments a lot. And maybe that's the romantic in me, right? Maybe that's because I think that there are so many different possibilities for each and every one of us. So
yes.
you pass the exam again. You have all these different jobs in accounting, and then you get back to Leo Burnett. You're there. You find your home.
I find my home. And then I am so lucky to be surrounded by just the best mentors,
Mm,
you know, um, who I just talked to last night. But I just worked my way. I started an associate director, so I was doing some accounting, and I don't know, opportunities just kept coming up. I had the best mentors that always advocated for me, and I loved to travel, and it gave me such an opportunity because this job has, obviously, we're owned by a French company, so that opened up a whole perspective for me. And then in 2015, I was put in charge of this huge North American project, which was to roll out an ERP system across North America. And I was put in charge of that. I led it.
so
And I think that was the start of, just progressing.
yeah. So you said that that opportunities came about. I want to push back on that a little bit
Yeah.
because I don't know that opportunities just happen to people. I think I did a show about a month ago with a woman named Amberly Lago, and she said something like luck finds you where your work puts you. Or something like that, right? It was like blessings, the blessings meet you where your preparation, has left you, or like some Instafluencer type,
Yeah.
quote
Yeah.
like that, but I thought it was, I think that luck looks an awful lot like hard work. So
Yeah, it does. I mean, when I say opportunities, opportunities come, but you got to go for them.
yeah,
So, every opportunity that came, I went for them. How do you go for them? First of all, I really believe that your hard work speaks for you.
mm,
So you go into something with with at least the confidence that, what, I can do this. I've shown that I could do it, and then you go for it. And sometimes I mean, there were times when I didn't get it. There's so much, as you know, there's a lot of political stuff that not only goes on in government but also in large corporations.
sure.
So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, and not a dig to culture, but when you deal with different cultures, there are different ideas of hierarchies.
Mhm. Yeah, there's also a different idea of what success is supposed to look like, right?
Yeah.
And what package it's supposed to come in.
Yeah, and there are times when people think that you have enough. Like, what else do you want?
Mhm.
What else can you get? You've got enough. You got to be grateful. There are times when there are those pushbacks as well. So you have to deal with all of that.
Do you think that that's a male-female issue? Do you think where do you think that comes from? Because I don't I think we never hear them say, "Oh, he's so ambitious," right? No, that never says it about men, but they certainly say that about women.
Yeah, they do. I think I mean, most of the time it's a male female, although it's been changing. I've been really, really interested and quite pleased at how the landscape has been changing in the last few years. I've watched it, and I don't know if it's because I'm in advertising and we have a more progressive culture. Um, I don't know if it's because we're bending over backwards to remove the stigma of working in advertising, where it used to be a male female thing and everyone's
Mhm.
creative and there's this creative vibe all over. And, um, I don't know if it's that, but I've seen a lot of improvement. But there was a lot of that. I mean, I have a story where I worked for a manufacturing firm that had offices in Arkansas, and I was always the only, and it was manufacturing, so I would walk across to the plant, where it was all men and they were all, on assembly lines, and I was the only woman, and I was the only diverse woman, in Arkansas, and they would make women jokes in front of me, and things like that. And coming from another country, it didn't probably hit me as hard as like if you were living here, because I wasn't really aware of that kind of divide, or that division. But I'd go home and tell my husband, he would be like, "What? They said what?" You know. So I think some of that, some of like not growing up here, also like kind of shielded me from, some of that, um, American terms, as you call it, or things that should have offended me, that just kind of
Do you think that I mean, is there an expectation that, that either the men have that are in the corporate, the C-suite level with you, that you are going to, like, speak for women, or that you're gonna speak for, diverse women? Or is there an expectation that women have that, you're going to have their back? I mean, is there, like, extra work you have to do?
Yeah, there is, for both. And especially at this stage in my life, I actually feel the pressure of, and it's good pressure, and it's something that I want to do, which is why I changed my, writing from writing under a pen name to writing under my real name, because I feel like I have to bring my whole self to the table, because I represent a lot. And I think about that. I think about, corporations constantly change. They have reorgs, they have, restructures, they shuffle things around. And the biggest thing for me right now to think about is always like, what is it going to do for me as a representative of the other women in my team? My team's probably 90% women. I have the biggest diverse team in department in the agency. And I always think, what does that say? How do my actions reflect on that? And what does that mean?
Mm.
When I'm promoted, what does that mean for the people that report to me? Does that mean that they get mobilization, that they get to do something more, that they get challenged? And I think it's because of what I went through, and when I first started. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so, as you know, I'm sort of fascinated by this idea of Wonderhell, right? This idea
Yes.
that with every next success, you sort of realize that there's even more out there than you even knew was possible, and it's amazing, it's incredible, it's humbling, it's wonderful. And also, it's kind of anxiety provoking and stress inducing, and it comes with a lot of exhaustion, right? It's
Yes.
hell. And I think a lot of the self-help books that are written today are all about, like, how to get through it, right? How to survive it. And I think it's better for us to figure out how to thrive in it, because I mean, if you figure out how to get through it, then you've just found your way to an easier path. And what I love about your career is that you never settled for the easier path. You were like, every 3 years, I'm going to find something else. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to continue to grow. And so you have always, in every next stage of your career, been in the next level of wonder hell. So, how has it felt to you? Is it, how have you learned to thrive in that experience?
I think about that a lot. So there's two things I want to talk about here with you. One is that I think the wonder hell got worse as I got more successful.
Did the hell
There,
got worse? Did the wonder
yeah,
also grow? Both
the wonder,
pieces
yes,
grew.
the hell got worse.
Mm.
And I know we didn't talk about this before when we met, or briefly, or I've never really written openly about it. I did write a book called The Year I Left, that was based on my experience because I did leave. In other words, my mom passed away in 2010, and it was the peak of my career, and it was the peak of when I was so involved in setting myself up for success that, I only had 2, 3 weeks of vacation. So I never made the time to go and visit her or
Mm.
see her. And the day that, and we were estranged for a few years for personal reasons. And I wanted to protect my children, from the stress of having an estranged relationship with a parent. And so I did my life here. I thrived. And when I finally realized, and she got really sick. So when I finally realized that um, it was time to make peace and go home and see her, I actually took 2 weeks off for Thanksgiving to see her, and I never made it. She passed away 3 days before I arrived. And I think what I did was I I immersed myself in the wonder part of it. So I came back, I let everything go, and I just kept working. And in that moment, 2015 was that year for me where I got that project. I was traveling. I had an apartment in Chicago, and I was going to France for weeks at a time. And it was my way of just dealing with it. And then the hell happened. um, I just went into, which I didn't know was a depression, but I totally changed.
Mm.
Came to a point where I was a high performing depressed person. I was high performing. I was succeeding in every aspect of my life, but I separated myself from my family. And it took a long time for that. It took 3 years in that hell space to keep up with succeeding and your mental state, and finding a happy balance between just extreme sadness and doing things that were out of character for me. And um, finding every excuse not to come home, finding every excuse to stay in New York, finding every excuse to stay in Chicago. I missed 2 years of my. He was 16 at that time, my son's life, but I was succeeding. I mean, this is what that project, those travels, staying away from my family what got me here. That's kind of like that was the price. Um,
At what point did you recognize that you were no longer yourself?
I started doing things that were out of character for me. Like, for example, like, worse things, but like the simplest thing is I'm a runner. I stopped running. I started, smoking, doing, just being unhealthy. And um, I did go for help. I did. So I went to seek therapy, and I said, like, oops, this is really weird. I'm just not feeling myself. And we worked through it, but it took a long time because I had all this guilt about my mom. I, you know, I had so much guilt about just life and death and how short life is and what am I doing. And then I also hit my 25-year anniversary, and I'm like, do I really want to be married more than 25 years? All those things. And the mind is a funny thing. The mind plays with you, and what you believe is what you believe.
Mhm.
Um, there's no stepping away from that. And so I kept going to therapy. And then, at the end of the day, the whole thing was that I never grieved my mother, and I needed to take time to grieve. And
Yeah, I mean, I would think that there would be like a double grieving process, right? I mean, grieving her actual death, but also grieving your relationship. I mean, it's almost like there's like a double loss that you have to
yeah,
that it
yeah,
and the whole world revolves around the grief of the death, but the grief of the relationship is, I think, probably so much harder. I mean, it's one where there is not closure that's there.
Yeah.
There's like you
Yeah.
said, there's no way to
Yeah.
finish.
And it was a big deal. What was really a big deal for me, and that was the first few pages of my very first book because I wrote about it, was I don't know why it was such a big deal for me that I would never be able to touch her. That was like the biggest deal for me. Like, we made peace on the phone and I told her I loved her and I took time off and I was gonna go see her. But just like just the fact that I just couldn't touch her anymore. Like, it
Mm.
was a big it was it was, to me, I mean, I still think about it now. It's like when you lose someone, it's like there's nothing tangible.
Had
No
you
matter
had
what.
a like a tactile relationship with her in the like was were you like was it a very affectionate relationship, lots of hand holding? Like was
Yes,
it
it was
okay.
always, and she was also, I mean, I've been fighting this all my life because I knew that I had tendencies for depression because she was very depressed, she was bipolar,
Mm.
and she would keep me out of school just to like cuddle in bed. And, she was the type of mom where she was just very physical and she had a lot of fault, but she was like very loving. And I think that's the one thing that, I drive my kids crazy because you know, I just love to touch them and hug them and whatever. And they're in their 30s. They're like, mm. But I think that was the main thing. And but you know what, Laura, I had to go through that because I'm so at peace today. And like with everything happening at work and what I've done and what I've accomplished, and the ability that I have to advise other women and to always tell them that they're not alone and we all go through the same thing, no matter what race, what culture, where you came from, what your background is. It's really helped me to find like a purpose.
Yeah, I love that that thought because I do think, I think love comes in so many forms and I've been reading a lot about like people's love languages and for some it's physical touch, for some it's quality time, for some it's acts of service, for some it's words of endearment or encouragement. And I think that there's so many different ways that we can express love. So to be cognizant of the way that you express it and to understand what you need, I think is really important. And I mean, I know certainly that like having children made me a better manager of my people, right? Because just
Yes.
being able to like look at people and talk to them and understand and realize that all pain is exquisite and local no matter what it is that you're going through. So I'm fascinated because I also writing is my therapy, right? Like when I'm upset about something, how I work it out is through writing. And I think there's like a governor that's in the back of your head that stops you from putting yourself fully out there, right? That tells you like, no, 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 someone's going to read this, maybe you want to write it a little bit more this way or that way. And you sort of write
Yes.
for an audience. And I had this horrifying experience where a couple months ago, I actually found some old journals of mine that I wrote when I was like in my first heartbreak when I was, 21 years old. And if I could just tell you how horrifying these were, because they were full of sturm and drang and drama, but also even then I was writing them as if somebody might find them, as if the ex-boyfriend might find them and see
Yeah.
them and read them and understand what he did to me. And so it's funny because I find now that when I'm like a little bit drunk or maybe I'm like super angry or super joyful or just like emo, like all up in my feels, that's when I write the best. So I'm interested that I'm interested in your journey of the therapy and how you wrote your way out of this experience in your life. Maybe you didn't write your way out, maybe that came afterwards, but it sounds like you wrote your way out of the depression by understanding it and sort of finding purchase for it in your head and
I
in your
did.
heart.
I did. I wrote my way out of it. I wrote my way out of every stage I've gone through in my life. My
Mm.
first two books were with my mom's passing away. My third book was a midlife crisis. My fourth book was that dark period in my time, and I wrote about impossible love because I felt like hopeless.
Mm.
So every book is a stage in my life, which is why now I'm writing Hallmark books because I'm really happy.
Well, I think we have to write what we know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's you know, I there's this theme that is with you, this sort of escapism theme. Like you're like, let's leave, let's go to the States, let's leave. And you're every 3 years. And then do I still want to be
Yeah.
married? And, for somebody who likes to move and to change and to grow, a lifetime marriage is it's I joke around that my husband's like he's like the cement in my shoes and I'm the helium in the balloons, right? So I'm
Oh,
always like,
that's the
let's do
same.
this, let's
Yeah.
do. And he's
Yes.
like, risk, let's worry about these things. And he keeps
Yes.
me really safe. He keeps me out of a lot of trouble. And
Yeah.
I think I kind of help him get a little more adventurous. But it sounds terrible to say he's the cement in my shoes, but it kind of works, right? But I'm
That's
also
the
like, I
same.
love traveling. I can't leave lunch without knowing what we're gonna have for dinner. Like I'm always like, what's next? What's next? So it's a long marriage.
Yes. And the thing is that I think, like your husband, he recognizes that in me. Like, there are days or times when I'm home for a week or two, and we're so used to being on our own and traveling and
Yes.
whatnot. So then he'll actually see it in my actions that I'm I'm feeling strangled. I need to travel. I need to go. And he'll say, go to New York or do whatever you need to do and come back. And it's just being independent like that. He's fine with it. He's been my supporter. He's given me the wings that I need. He used to watch the kids and take them to the park when I was taking the CPA exam. Like, he is the reason why there's I'm just allowed to be me, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Yeah, my husband used to take my kids to the park when I was writing my first book in
Yeah.
2007, and they were 5 and 7 at the time. And he'd be like, "We're gonna go to the park, and then we're gonna go to lunch, and then we're gonna go to the U.S. Constitution Museum." And he had this whole day planned. And he'd come
Yes.
home, and he'd be like, "All right, we've been gone for 7 hours. How much work did you get done?" And I'm like, "I wrote half a chapter." And he'd be like, "Well, what do you mean? I've been like, what?" He's like exhausted. "I've been with these kids all day. What are you talking about?" I'm like, there's only so much. Like after a certain number of hours, all my brain produces is like see spot run. Like there's just there's nothing there.
I
And so
agree.
we had to figure that. But okay, so here's what I need to know from you, because this is like, I feel like you and I are the same kindred spirits. I come from like a long line of European mutt Jews who were clearly gypsy blood in us. um how are you handling the pandemic and quarantine and being home?
It's been
I
tough.
It's hard. Like, I have my home office. I've worked from home for years, for 20 years, but I haven't had them here also. Like,
Yes.
that's challenging. How are you
Yes.
handling this?
All three kids are home. The 31, the 30, and the 18. So the 31 is a nurse, and you know, I didn't want him to live alone. A lot of his friends are going through PTSD with COVID, and he works
Yes.
in the ER. And
Mm,
so we cleared our downstairs area for him so that he comes from work, he leaves his clothes in the car, he takes a shower, he does all he can, his precautions, but he's
yes.
home. He's home. The second one, she's home. She used to work downtown Chicago, but again, it's so hard for young people now who live alone. And it's that loneliness and that isolation. So she's home. And then my third one goes to St. Louis University, and I kept him home. He's not happy, but he's high risk. He has asthma. He reminds me every day that I should have sent him back to school. So I go through that, but it's been tough. What I love is the fact that everyone's home. what i what's really difficult for me is just knowing I can't go anywhere. It's been really tough on me mentally. And you know what, Laura, I haven't been able to write. I feel and I realize that the reason I've been writing is because I write in hotel rooms, in bathrooms, in lounges, in airports, in on the plane. And like, I'm sitting here in my home and I can't get an idea together.
The plane is the greatest place. You, like, get
Yes.
on and you're and it's nice because it's I mean, I remember when my kids were really little and I had, like, a certain amount of time till, like, I had to pick them up at daycare or the nanny was gonna leave or I had to pick them up at school, and I was never as efficient as when I had that, like, that clock ticking, right? Like, I had
Yes,
to get stuff done. I think there's nobody more efficient than a mom of young children
I
because you
agree.
just
I
first of all,
agree.
you're good at, like, putting out fires, you're good at handling stuff, you're good at sort of, like, I gotta plan the long game for dinner, but I also have to deal with like, the diaper change right now. Like you're sort of in the middle of everything. It's a
Yeah.
really good, it's a really good training ground, I think.
Yes.
You're writing these books and you're doing it undercover. You're doing it under a pen name. Why did you choose that in the first place?
Because the first book was very personal.
Mm,
Um, it was more. It was, you know, it was just about. It was about my relationship with my mom. But at that time, it was also when 50 Shades of Grey like
mhm.
blew up. So it was a story about, it was a romance story, but there was a backstory about a girl and her mom, her relationship with her mom. And I just wasn't comfortable enough, number one, for my family, to protect my family. And second is that it took a while for me to come into my own writing sexy scenes. I
Mm.
just have to tell you, it took a while.
Right, because 'cause you're not just a novelist, you're a romance novelist, right? I mean, like, what did
Yeah.
you I've read 50 Shades of Grey, and I remember thinking, like, "God, there are a lot of really bored, sad housewives out there because it was I mean,
Yes.
it's an interesting idea, but it's not, like, the greatest written series of
No.
books of all time.
And actually, I don't write that graphic. I just, it's romance, so obviously they have to be
Consummate,
romantic.
right.
But yeah, but I don't write descriptions. There's no graphic, and a lot of my writing is more because I love poetry, so a lot of it is a lot of prose, which is maybe why they didn't do as well as the other books, because there's a time when all these women were just wanting,
Sex.
yes, that
Yes.
type of book. No, but mine are different. But I actually, this is so weird now that you say that, because I also didn't want to sound foreign. So I had to change my name.
Yeah.
I wanted people to
Well,
read my book. And at that time, I did think they'd see Anna Gomez, they're not going to pick it up, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of data to back that up that, people like yeah, I mean, you look at like the history of Hollywood and changing names of actors so that they're, all American and palatable
Yes.
and all of that nonsense. And then, the studies that show that if you put two ideal, exactly identical resumes in front of a hiring committee and one has a foreign name and one doesn't, right? Or even one has a man's name and one doesn't. who- People pick up, you know, the one that sounds like the white dude before they
Yeah.
pick up anything else. So, yeah, I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. And so, were you did people around you, the people that you're working with know that you were doing this, or was it completely on the QT?
QT. For the first three books, nobody knew. And it's so funny because then people would tell me, like, if only you told people, they would buy the book. And I wasn't comfortable yet. I was building my career. And I felt like, you know, there's still a thing about being a CFO or a controller and pushing policy and procedure and being in a meeting and people looking at you going, you write women's fiction or romance.
Right, right.
I couldn't reconcile the two. And what really helped me to reconcile it, though, was when I started standing up for different platforms and different beliefs. And I'm like, you know what? I do want to push my platform and my brand and my identity. And I do want to be proud of what I do. And I learned that, guess from who? From my mentors. I have an EVP legal counsel who's my mentor, been my mentor for years. My CEO is my mentor. Just the top executive levels at Leo Burnett basically said, there's nothing wrong with bringing yourself to the table, your whole self. And you should be proud of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the concern. I mean, if maybe it would have been different if you were in a creative job,
Yes.
but because you were in a quote unquote serious job, right?
Yes.
So to be pushing policy and have the person across the table thinking like, yeah, but she wrote that sexy scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like maybe it wasn't super graphic, but like I know what's going on in her mind, right? Like
Yeah.
it just changes, I think, the way people perceive you, but also, it is as you are trying to stand up for other women and to bring diversity in all different ways into the workforce. It's hypocritical not to bring your whole self. So it's sort of the struggle. So how what was the what quote unquote what was the wait, first of all, did the people from the train know that you were writing these books? Did you tell them?
Yeah. And they're so cute. They bought them all, and everyone would have their books open reading my book. the
I
train.
love that.
And then I would take it and post it on Instagram. And like I wouldn't tell people that they're actually my friends. I'd be like, random people are reading my book.
I love that. You're
They're
like the
so
Wizard of
cute.
Oz in every possible way. But I love that at least like your train posse knew that they knew Christine Bray was you. So tell us your coming out story.
So I came out in 2015 and I went to Manila for a book signing, and I went with two very famous authors, and so the reception was just huge. And that was the first time my family actually attended a book signing, and was very proud that I had written these books. And then at work, there was an article on USA Today about 3 years ago that featured my book that was optioned for film. And all of a sudden I was in a meeting and this email popped up, and our CEO had sent it to the entire agency. He was so proud.
Because wait,
And
so the USA Today story said Christine Bray,
yeah, yeah.
aka Anna Gomez.
No, it said Christine Bray, and then he said, Anna is Christine Bray, and this is like a great story. Like, like he forwarded it to the rest of the executive team and everyone was sending me these emails like, oh my God, we
But
didn't
did you
know.
before that have to like walk in sheepishly to the CEO's office and be like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I got to tell you this thing," or did people just start seeing pictures and like did
I
it?
think they started seeing pictures. For a while there was, when I started this high profile position, we made a deal that we would not, when they announced my promotion and everything to this position, we made a deal that we would not post pictures, because at that time I wasn't comfortable with somebody putting together a Christine Bray picture and an Anna Gomez picture and saying, oh, she's the same. And then we
Mm.
were like, and then Adweek would probably say, like, what is the CFO of, you know, I just wasn't comfortable. It took a while for me to be comfortable. And let me tell you, I just said this last night, I'm still in the stage where I'm not full. Like, I'm a romance writer. I watch what I post on Instagram. I watch what I post um, in terms of my points of view. I always maintain professional pictures. Like, I don't, I mean, other authors you see out there are like posting, which is great. You have the creative license to do what you want. But I'm still very careful because this is my priority. I love this job, and I can make a lot more impact with this job, and I I want to keep it.
Right, so there's not going to be any like bodice ripping photos of you, like
No, no,
nothing with you and Fabio like,
no,
up there. There's a
no.
90s reference for you right there, Fabio.
I never
Had
found him cute, by the
oh
way.
no, even no, definitely not my type. Have you gotten pressure from uh from your publisher to like go more blue in the stuff that you're writing for the market, or is it like are you firmly set in a market that's like they want the romance but they want a little steam but they don't want, triple X?
No, I can write whatever I want. It's more a conscious decision of what I've done. So first of all, after the sixth book, I decided really not to write anymore. I'm like, I'm going to focus on my career. And then this opportunity came up with Christopher Polaha, and I thought, you know what, it's a great opportunity. I've never experienced working on a book and bringing it to screen, and that was another challenge that I wanted to learn about. I wanted to try and see how it was. Um, because again, collaborating with him and he as a producer, and having this deal where we would write the script ourselves together and actually package the series that we're writing, was just so interesting to me.
And so this is another Wonderhell moment, right? This is another like you've got the growing in your career, you've got the how do I come out as an author and what do I represent and how do I represent myself, my career, women, my family, all of that. And then this one, it's something you've never done before. And I would imagine that now that everybody knows it's you, and you're doing something you haven't done before and it's like the stakes are higher, do you feel that pressure of like, well, what if it's not good?
Yeah,
What if it doesn't work?
yeah, always, always. There's always this pressure, and there's even even the fact that Christopher is writing with me, like he could have picked any author and he chose me. And it's really been a fun experience for me. But I keep thinking, like, you know, people are very, no, not people, readers are promiscuous. They'll read whatever, right?
Mm.
So, and they're loyal to one, they're loyal to the other. They, I've got a following, but they read other people's books as well. I mean, you'll never know. It's the times. It depends, right? Sometimes a book that you'll never think will do well does really well. And then you think your book's really good and it doesn't do well.
Yeah, I had a blog post that I took me 10 minutes in the back of a cab in New York City to write, and like 115,000 people have read it on LinkedIn, and I have some that I've, struggle and I edit and I edit and I, spend months on them and I put them up and it's like 3 people read them and it's usually me and
Yeah.
my mother and my husband. Like you just don't know. But so it's a little bit like lightning in a bottle, right? So how do
Yeah.
you, I launched my last book, Limitless. I had no people. I had 0. I had not a mailing list
I
at
read it,
all.
by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
Wow.
it's amazing. I'm in awe of you. You're
Oh
just
my god.
wonderful.
I'm just gonna awkwardly pass that over because I
Yeah.
that's I'm thank you. So, but I feel like I got so lucky in the people who read it and picked it up and then tweeted about it and sent it out to people and um you know um there was a day where Robin Roberts read the book and she tweeted her and put on Instagram and Facebook and all of her social media to like 5 million followers.
Oh
She
my
like
gosh.
quoted a line from it. And all of a sudden, and then she invited me on to Good Morning America. And all of a sudden, my book's like 121 in all of Amazon. And it's crazy. And
It's
the day
great.
she did that, I actually went to pick up my son at school, and he's, I guess, 15 at the time, 14 and a half, 15 at the time. And he looks at me and he's like, Mom, that's kind of a big deal, right? And I was like, Yeah. And he was like, people wrote better books,
Yeah.
right? I was like, "Well, screw you, man." And he's like, "No, but I mean, like, people have written better books and they've worked harder and they haven't gotten this much attention." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I just I want you to just take a moment and just focus on how amazing this is right now." And it was so true because I do think people write much better books and they work much harder. And there are some people who write terrible books and they do nothing. And I like to think I'm somewhere in between, but you just don't know. So you put that book out and you hope that something's going to take off, but there's so much that's out of your control.
There is. And that's the vulnerability that you are subject to. And you have to be happy with being vulnerable because you're putting your heart out there really. And, just seeing what happens.
It's so hard. So do you read the comments? Do you read the reviews?
To a certain extent I do. I don't read all of them. First of all, I'm so grateful this is not my main gig because
Mhm.
I am so competitive the way that I am,
Yes.
and I have so much. I would be like, killing myself over what people are saying, and that's why I'm so lucky. I have a main gig that takes my focus out of it, and I really write just as a release, and then I let it out in the world, and we'll see. We see where it goes.
Is that harder though? Because it's so personal to you. Like if you're writing your way out of all of your experiences, if you're writing for therapy, you really, I mean, the fact that it's fiction, does that help to maybe
It
give you a little
helps.
bit of armor?
It does. It gives me armor, but it's not really the armor that I need. I think um, it just means a lot to me. One person, a couple of people, but this one person that has become a friend of mine. She read one of my books and put a tattoo of my book cover on her ankle. Um, if there were any, and that book won a bronze award for reader's favorite. But even without the award, the fact that it impacted a person that much, where she made changes in her life because she learned from the book, to me is like it was worth, like having your husband take the kids somewhere so that you can write 100,000 words. you know um those are the things that mean a lot to me, and I think it
Yes.
really helps. It helps my frame of mind, because I'm telling you, I'm very competitive. I mean, I have a story where, like, a month ago, Yahoo Finance told me I won one of the top women executives, and I went to my son and I said, "Oh, I bet I'll be 99." And he said the same thing. He's like, "Mom, top 100. It
Right.
doesn't matter if you're number 100." I'm like, "Yeah, but can I just be like 49 or something?" Like, I kept
Right.
going
Like,
and going. Yeah. And
totally.
he was just like, "You gotta you have to chill, you know."
But I think, I mean, for me, that's the Wonderhell piece, right? Because like if you're 99, it's like, well, what about the other 98 people? Like, why are they better than me? And I could do more. If you were like number 101, like I ran the Chicago Marathon years ago, and I had done it because I had run Boston on a year where it was 92
Congratulations.
degrees. Thank you. So I'm very slow. It took me 5.5 hours to run that marathon in Boston. It was
I'm slow
92
too.
degrees. And a friend of mine was like, God, that really sucks. You were training for a sub 4 marathon. Cause four is like, that's the
Yes,
like,
that's the
you're a runner,
dream.
like four,
Yes.
that's like the
Yeah.
number. So I'm running Chicago, and it's only 6 months after Boston, and everything hurts. I should get like I'd gone from never running in my life to running my first mile to running
Oh
Boston in
my
like,
gosh.
2 years. So
Oh
of
my
course I'm
gosh.
running this marathon, everything in me hurts, and I'm running and I'm running, I'm running, and I get to a point and I start doing the math at like mile 20, and I'm like, I'm not feeling so well. So I can either, and I don't know if I'm going to make 4 hours, so I can either run faster and maybe pass out and not make it, or I could slow down and finish for sure. And there's like the difference between 3:59:59 and 4:00:01 is
Yeah.
like 10 years. And I knew I wasn't going to make it under 4. So I was like, I just need a 4:00 something. And I'll be
Hmm.
damned, but I finished that marathon in 4:09:59 because I just was like, I'm so competitive. But I think that's what happens, right? Like you see the possibility and you're like, I need to I need to lean into that. I need to do more. Like if I'm 99, damn it, next year I'm going to be 47, and the year after that
Can
I'm going to
I
be,
ask you about that though? I'm curious about that because we are both like, I think our minds work in the same way.
yes.
Don't you get bored though? I can't run 26 miles. Like, at a certain point, I am like dead bored. Like, no song will entice me.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, I do get bored, which is why I don't run anymore. And I row now, and so the hardest race you do is like a head race, which is like 20 minutes. Like that's the most, but most of it's sprinting. So you're like all out 180 beat per minute heart rate at like for like 4 minutes or 8 minutes. So like now I'm like all in with that. But when I
Yeah.
was running, that's when I made the decision that I was going to leave the last business that I founded, because I was like, I've been there, I've done that, I've learned, I've done what I'm going to do. I've solved the puzzle enough times. I haven't learned anything new in a while, and it's time to leave. And actually, you'll find this funny. What I dreamed up that I was going to do was actually going to be um, a sex toy delivery business, because I was like, there are so many bored people. If 50 Shades of
Ah!
Grey sold all those copies, I bet I could do this. It would be like Stitch Fix, but for sex. And I bought the URL and I wrote a whole business plan, but I
That's
never actually ended
amazing.
up doing it. But it would have been amazing. So these are the things that I would get very bored on runs. But even now that I'm, my full time job is writing and speaking, you're the only other person I've ever met who has a reader who put a tattoo of the book on their body. I have a reader who did that, and she sent me a video of why she did it and what the book meant to her, and I couldn't speak for like an hour.
Yeah.
I was gobsmacked, and what I felt when she did it wasn't that I was honored. I felt pressure. I felt like, "Oh my god, I better get this right." Like if I'm putting stuff out into the world where people are reading it and they're making changes in their life because of it, it's not just about like getting the bit on stage that's funny. It's not just about telling the right joke or having the good cold open or, writing out the right story, for you. I got to get it right. Like
Yeah.
that's that's what's stopping me from getting bored now, is that I'm so afraid of giving people bad advice. I saw somebody in a book signing line once who was like, I started reading your book. I read the first half and I quit my job, and I wanted to be like, you should read the second half.
Yeah.
So, like, do you have people who come up to you who are like, "I read your book and I left my husband," like, or "I read your book and I'm gonna marry my wife," or like, do you have people? I would imagine that people get
Yeah.
really pulled into the story and the
Yeah.
romance and the possibility.
Yeah. And they recognize life is so short. I'm
Oh,
going to travel the world. you
Yes.
know. Um, and those are the things. But most of all, I get messages of people that are so despondent and so sad and so hurt and in so much pain. And reading the book, they're like, oh my gosh, like it's not just me, and it isn't just you. It's there's a whole bunch of us that have gone through that, and we make it through. And that's kind of, and there's the pressure. It's like showing people that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that it's not all darkness, because a lot of people, right, especially these days, they're just so isolated,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. Yeah. It's lonely, and your books help bring um, comfort to people and imagination and dreaming. And I can't wait to get back on the road and travel and go places. But right now,
me too.
I do it through fiction. And I've spent I spend a lot of time reading a lot of nonfiction since I'm in the business and
Hmm.
author and self-help space. But fiction has really been it's been my salve during this pandemic.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
fiction and shoes. I didn't stop buying shoes.
I think my stilettos think I died. I really do. I looked at my shelf the other day and they're all dusty. It's so do you put
Well,
on
can I
shoes
give
every
you a
day?
tip? There's
Yes.
one time a month ago I went somewhere and I wore sneakers and my feet hurt. So then I figured, you know what? We're so used to wearing heels. I need to start wearing my heels again. So I started wearing them around the house, because something happens to that you're
Your
so
arches.
used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you should start wearing heels around the
I should
house.
because I think I've worn nothing but sneakers for the last 6 months, and I did, the other day put on a pair of high-heeled Doc Marten boots because it was election day, and I was like, "I'm putting on my
Yeah.
kicking boots. I'm putting on my fighting boots." And by the end of the day, my feet really hurt, and my back hurt, my hip hurt, like,
Yeah.
everything hurt. I mean, my
I
body was like, "Okay, it's sweatpant time." It was
I said to
like
my husband, I think they grew or they're swollen or something. Like they're so used to not being in shoes that they're
yeah.
rebelling.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, that I am definitely gonna do that because I really, like this is I I walk out on stage wearing not a sexy dress, but like a body conscious dress. I show my arms, which are muscular. I wear high heels and like
Yeah.
I walk out as this like alter ego badass LGO, which takes away all the stage fright that I have because backstage I'm just Laura Gassner Otting and I'm like ready to vomit, right? So like, but I walk on stage as the person that people expect me to be as limitless. And you can't do that wearing a pair of sneakers. It just
No.
you could be funky, you could be fun, but like it's not
Yeah.
the same. Yeah.
Yeah. But especially for me, I'm only 5'1", so I need my heels.
Yeah. So that's pretty great. Yeah, I am 5'5" and 3/4, although as according to my last doctor's appointment, I'm only 5'5" now, so it's begun. It's really, really terrible.
Yeah.
Anna, this has been amazing. I feel like we're like 2 peas in a pod. Javier LaFianza, the former executive director of the Hugh O'Brien Leadership Organization, who connected the two of us, said that we would get along famously, and he was absolutely right. You're fantastic. Anna, how can people who want to pick up your books, how can tell people how they can find you?
Well, you can find me on Amazon under Christine Bray or Anna Gomez. I have a website, annagomezbooks.com. I'm on Twitter as Anna Gomez Books, and on Instagram. So I'm everywhere.
That is fantastic. I do you have a photo of the tattoo? Can you
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll
can you
text
bring
it
it?
to
Yeah,
you.
text it to me. I will put it in the show notes. Seth Godin has this incredible bit where he talks about how well, Seth Godin, right? And so marketing. Has this whole thing about he talks about how Harley Davidson became so successful, not because they made great motorcycles, but because they created a culture, right? Something and people
Yes.
tattoo it on their arms. Like he created something people want to tattoo on their arms, and he's like, do something tattoo worthy. So you should send him the photo of your reader's tattoo. I think he would dig it.
I will. It was very nice to be here. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to talk to you,
It has
and
been great to talk
hope
to
you
you
keep in
too.
touch.
Well, I wasn't able to read your books before we did this. We just set this up a couple of days ago, and you're such a sport for jumping in last minute. But I've ordered them. They're coming this weekend. I'm going to dive into your world, and I cannot wait. And I encourage anybody listening to do the same.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you. Bye.